Hello, you all, and welcome to your sixth and final module, Regulatory Compliance and Strategic Accountability. In this module, we'll explore how regulatory compliance and political dynamics impact institutional strategies for equitable access, sustainability, and growth. We'll examine how these external pressures shape decision-making and how institutes can use them to support their mission. We'll apply the RACI framework to clarify roles and responsibilities, ensuring accountability and smooth implementation of strategies. By defining who is R, responsible, A, accountable, C, consulted, and I, informed, we'll see how institutions can execute plans effectively in complex regulatory environments. Finally, we'll integrate insights from previous modules to set you up to develop the last part of your strategic plan that will align your institutional priorities. This plan will combine compliance needs with your goals for growth, equity, and sustainability, creating a cohesive and actionable roadmap. To achieve these outcomes, we will focus on 4 key points. First, we'll analyze how regulations and political pressures shape decision-making and influence innovation within institutions. Next, we will explore strategies to turn compliance demands into opportunities that align with goals for growth, equity, and sustainability. Using that RACI framework, we'll clarify roles and responsibilities to ensure accountability and effective implementation of plans. We will bring it together financially, equitably, technology, politically, into our final strategic plan that supports accountability, sustainability, and mission alignment. In this session, we are going to examine how regulatory compliance in both K-12 and higher ed shapes access, quality, equity, safety, and transparency. Regulatory compliance sets minimum standards for curriculum, teacher qualifications, facility requirements, and funding conditions. These standards ensure institutions meet consistent expectations that support educational quality and accessibility, while also holding schools accountable to students, families, and broader communities. Regulatory compliance in education is built on foundational principles that guide schools and universities in maintaining high standards, fair access, and public trust. These principles of accountability, equity, quality standards, privacy, transparency, and safety form a cohesive framework that ensures educational institutions operate responsibly and inclusively. Accountability means taking responsibility for student outcomes by consistently tracking and reporting on their performance. This priority involves gathering and analyzing data on student achievements, progress, and challenges. By openly sharing this information with educators, parents, and the larger community, we can identify areas for improvement and celebrate successes. Accountability ensures that our decisions are data-driven and that we remain committed to the continuous improvement process. Equity is about ensuring every student has access to the resources and support they need to succeed, especially those from historically marginalized communities or those who have special needs. This involves intentionally allocating additional resources, such as funding, student services, and other specialized programs to address the unique needs of each student. Our goal is to level the playing field so that all students, regardless of background or ability, have equitable opportunities to thrive academically and social-emotionally. Quality standards establish the foundation for high-quality educational experiences by setting clear guidelines for curriculum design, teacher qualifications, and facility management. These standards ensure that all students have access to well-trained educators, an engaging, comprehensive curriculum, and a safe, conducive learning environment. Adhering to quality standards help maintain consistency across schools, upholding a standard of education that prepares students for future success. Privacy is essential for protecting students' personal and educational information. This priority involves implementing robust policies and systems to safeguard student data against unauthorized access, ensuring that all information, such as academic records, personal details, and health information, is kept confidential. Respecting student privacy helps build trust with families and supports a safe environment where students feel secure. Transparency involves openly sharing information on key performance metrics, such as academic outcomes, funding use, and school improvement initiatives with the public. By making this information accessible, we encourage community engagement, foster trust, and provide stakeholders with a clear understanding of our progress, challenges, and priorities. Transparency helps keep the educational system accountable to families and to the communities it serves. Safety and inclusion focuses on creating an environment where every student feels secure, respected, and valued. This priority includes both physical safety measures, such as maintaining secure facilities and implementing emergency protocols, or fostering inclusive school culture, where diversity is celebrated and all students feel they belong. By promoting both safety and inclusion, we help ensure that students are in a supportive environment that enables them to focus on learning and personal growth. Accountability in K-12 education ensures transparency and high standards, requiring schools to report outcomes and adhere to specific guidelines. In the U.S., public schools are obligated to follow the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA. ESSA mandates standardized reporting of academic performance, graduation rates, and other outcomes to secure federal funding. U.S. private schools, though not governed by ESSA, often follow accreditation requirements from organizations like the National Association of Independent Schools, which demand a rigorous academic and operational standard. For instance, a New York preparatory school must demonstrate college readiness through standardized test results. Globally, public school accountability varies, but often involves national assessments, such as South Korea's National Assessment of Educational Achievement, where schools publicly report student performance to identify areas for improvement, or Finland's requirement to submit outcome data to the National Education Evaluation Authority to promote equity and quality. Worldwide private schools, especially those offering programs like an International Baccalaureate or an IB, must also meet strict standards, as seen in IB schools submitting annual reports on exam results and teacher qualifications to maintain certification as an IB school. These systems of accountability, though diverse, share the common goal of ensuring educational excellence and equity for all students. Accountability in post-secondary education is a key compliance area that ensures institutions meet rigorous performance standards and report critical outcomes to stakeholders. For U.S. public universities, accountability is primarily enforced through the Higher Education Act, which mandates that institutions report data on graduation rates, job placement outcomes, student loan default rates, and enrollment demographics. These metrics are essential for maintaining federal funding eligibility and are scrutinized by the Department of Education as well as accrediting agencies. Public universities also have a responsibility to publish these performance metrics to ensure transparency and demonstrate accountability to students, parents, and the wider community. For U.S. private institutions, those that receive federal funding must meet accountability standards set by their accrediting agencies, like the Middle States Commission on Higher Education or the Higher Learning Commission. To maintain accreditation, private universities must report on key outcomes, including graduation and retention rates, as well as student success metrics. Additionally, federally funded private institutions are required to report student loan default rates and other performance indicators under the Higher Education Act, ensuring these private institutions remain accountable to students and to the federal government. Globally, public universities in the European Union follow a process that mandates universities report graduation rates, employment outcomes for graduates, and other quality metrics. This standardization aligns universities across the EU, promoting transparency and allowing for easy comparison of institutional performance. Similarly, in Japan, public universities are regulated by the National University Corporation Act, which requires public reporting on student achievement, research contributions, and employment rates to ensure they meet national standards for public accountability. Global private institutions, especially those with international accreditation like an IB and other globally recognized standards, are also required to meet accountability measures. Many are obligated to report graduation rates, post-graduation employment data, and academic performance metrics to maintain accreditation and to demonstrate their commitment to high-quality educational standards. Equity regulations ensure that resources reach underserved communities, helping to bridge gaps in access and achievement. In the U.S., Title I funding provides additional resources to low-income public schools, addressing disparities and supporting students in need. Private schools that receive federal funding must also follow non-discrimination laws, such as the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, to ensure fair access. Internationally, countries like Canada and Australia promote equity by allocating resources for Indigenous students in public schools, while private institutions often offer scholarships or targeted support for underserved communities. These equity measures help ensure that resources and support reach students who need them most, fostering an inclusive and equitable educational environment. Equity in post-secondary education is centered on ensuring access and opportunities for historically marginalized and underserved communities. In the U.S., public colleges and universities promote access through programs like the Pell Grant, which provides federal financial aid to low-income students, enabling them to afford higher education. Private institutions receiving federal funding are also required to adhere to Title IX anti-discrimination laws, ensuring fairness in admissions, funding, and campus resources for all students. Globally, equity initiatives in public universities vary by country, but often target specific populations. In Canada, the Post-Secondary Student Support Program allocates funding for Indigenous students to improve access to higher education, while in South Africa, the National Student Financial Aid Scheme provides financial assistance to low-income and Black students as part of the country's post-apartheid educational reforms. Private institutions worldwide also adopt equity measures, particularly when they receive government subsidies. For example, Australian private universities must offer scholarships or financial aid to underserved groups, such as rural and Indigenous students, to ensure inclusion in higher education. These efforts, though shaped by local contexts, share a common goal of addressing systemic inequities and creating a pathway for educational success for all students. Quality standards in K-12 schools aim to ensure consistency, equity, and excellence in education across systems. In the United States, public schools adhere to standards set by state departments of education. In Wisconsin, we call them the Department of Public Instruction, or DPI. They regulate curriculum, teacher certification, and facility requirements to maintain uniform quality. For example, public schools in Texas must meet state-mandated curriculum benchmarks and employ certified educators in core subjects. Private schools in the U.S. are held accountable by accreditation agencies such as the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, which require adherence to specific curriculum and facility standards to maintain accreditation, as seen in elite preparatory schools meeting rigorous academic expectations. Globally, public schools often follow national frameworks to ensure quality and equity. In Finland, all public schools are required to follow the national core curriculum, which emphasizes critical thinking, equitable access to high-quality learning, while Japan's School of Education law ensures uniformity through prescribed academic and facility standards. Private schools worldwide also face strict quality measures. In the UK, private institutions must pass inspections by the Independent Schools Inspectorate, which evaluates academic programs, facilities, and operational standards to ensure excellence. These systems, while diverse, reflect a shared commitment to providing students with reliable and effective educational experiences. Quality standards in post-secondary education ensure institutions provide consistent, high-level academic and operational experiences for students. In the United States, public universities must adhere to criteria set by regional accrediting agencies, such as the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. These standards mandate rigorous curriculum development, faculty qualifications, and facility management, all of which are required for federal aid eligibility. For instance, a public school in California must meet WASC's benchmarks for course design and research output to remain an accredited post-secondary institution. Similarly, private colleges in the U.S. are accountable to accrediting bodies like the Higher Learning Commission, which oversee curriculum quality and institutional resources to ensure they meet federal funding requirements. Globally, public universities often follow national or regional quality assurance standards. In the UK, public universities must comply with the Quality Assurance Agency guidelines, which assess course quality, research achievements, and campus facilities, while Finland's Finnish Education Evaluation Center monitors compliance with national education standards. Private universities face comparable scrutiny. In the UK, private universities must pass QAA inspections to operate legally, while internationally, many private universities seek accreditation to validate their academic quality and secure government subsidies. These frameworks reflect a shared global commitment to maintaining excellence and accountability in higher education. Privacy in K-12 schools is governed by policies and regulations designed to protect student information and ensure data security. In the United States, public schools must comply with the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA, which includes and enforces strict controls over access to and sharing of student data, granting parents or eligible students the right to review and request changes to their records. For example, a public high school in Florida must obtain parental consent before sharing a student's academic records with a third party. While private schools in the U.S. are not legally bound by FERPA, many adopt similar privacy policies to meet accreditation standards or to comply with state-specific privacy laws. Globally, privacy regulations such as the General Data Protection Regulation set stringent data security requirements for schools in the European Union. Public schools in the EU must secure student data, limit access, and obtain consent before collecting or processing personal information, with severe penalties for breaches. This regulation also applies to private schools within the EU, requiring them to implement robust data protection measures and obtain explicit consent from parents or guardians when collecting student information. These privacy frameworks ensure that schools worldwide prioritize the security and confidentiality of student data. Privacy in post-secondary education is critical for safeguarding student data and ensuring compliance with legal standards. In the United States, public colleges and educational universities are governed by FERPA, similar to K-12, mandating strict protections for student records, limits access to authorized personnel, and imposes penalties for noncompliance. For instance, a public university in Texas must ensure that only approved faculty or administrators access student records, and students must consent before sharing their information with external parties. Private universities that receive federal funding also must comply with FERPA, requiring them to implement similar measures for data security and controlled access to student information. Globally, the Data Protection Regulation applies to public universities in the EU, requiring them to safeguard student data, enforce access controls, and maintain transparency in data management, with substantial fines for violations. This regulation extends to private universities in the EU, obligating them to follow strict protocols, including obtaining informed consent before collecting student data and ensuring secure handling of all personal information. These privacy standards, both in the US and internationally, reflect a shared commitment to upholding student privacy and data security in higher education. Transparency in education ensures that schools provide clear, accessible information about performance and outcomes. This fosters accountability and trust. In the United States, the ESSA Act that we spoke about earlier is required to disclose key performance metrics and demographic data to the public, promoting transparency in evaluating school effectiveness. For example, a public school in Illinois must publish an annual report detailing student achievement on standardized tests and graduation rates. While private schools in the U.S. are not legally required to disclose such data, many voluntarily share performance metrics to demonstrate quality and to meet accreditation requirements set by organizations like the National Association of Independent Schools. Globally, transparency in public schools is similarly maintained through national regulations. In Japan, the School Information Disclosure Law requires schools to publish annual reports on academic performance and institutional metrics, while South Korea mandates reporting on national exam outcomes to ensure accountability. Private schools offering an international baccalaureate program must also share data to maintain accreditation, providing transparency to parents and communities about academic outcomes. These practices, both mandatory and voluntary, highlight the importance of making educational data accessible to stakeholders to promote informed decision-making and trust. Transparency in post-secondary education ensures that institutions provide accessible information to the public, fostering accountability and informed decision-making. In the United States, public universities are required under the Clery Act to disclose campus crime statistics, graduation rates, and financial aid data. For example, a state university in Michigan must publish annual safety reports and graduation outcomes to ensure accountability to students, parents, and the public. Private universities receiving federal funding aid are also subject to the Clery Act, requiring them to disclose similar information to maintain eligibility for Title IV funding. Globally, transparency regulations vary but often emphasize public access to key performance metrics, In Australia, public universities must comply with the Tertiary Education Quality and Standards Agency by publishing annual reports on student performance, academic research achievements, and student demographics. Similarly, Japan's University of Transparency Law mandates public universities report on student outcomes and financial data annually. Private institutions, such as European universities, are required to publish academic performance data, including retention rates, to maintain transparency and to uphold international credibility. Private institutions across Europe are required to publish academic performance data, including retention and graduation rates, to maintain transparency and uphold international credibility. These practices reflect a shared commitment worldwide to providing stakeholders with the information needed to evaluate and to trust higher education institutions. Safety and inclusion in K-12 schools are critical to fostering environments where all students can learn and thrive. In the United States, public schools are governed by the Individuals with Disabilities Act, IDEA, which requires schools to provide accessible facilities and accommodations for students with disabilities, ensuring their safety and inclusion in all aspects of education. For instance, a public school in Iowa must offer wheelchair accessible classrooms and individualized education plans, IEPs, for eligible students. Private schools, while not bound by IDEA, must comply with Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, if they receive federal funds, ensuring accessibility and safety for students with disabilities. Globally, public schools emphasize inclusion and safety through national legislation. In Norway, the Education Act mandates inclusive environments, integrating anti-bullying policies and mental health resources to support overall student well-being, while Canada's Safe Schools Act enforces comprehensive safety measures, including violence prevention programs. Private schools also adhere to safety regulations. In South Africa, private schools are required by the South African Schools Act to meet national safety standards, which include security measures, anti-bullying initiatives, and health protocols to promote student well-being. These frameworks demonstrate a universal commitment to creating safe and inclusive educational spaces for all students. Safety and inclusion in post-secondary education are also foundational to ensuring equitable access and a secure, safe, and thriving learning environment for all students. In the United States, public universities are governed by the Americans with Disabilities Act and the Clery Act, which require accessible facilities for students with disabilities and mandate the disclosure of campus safety information, including crime statistics. For example, a public university in New York must provide accessible dormitories and regularly publish crime reports to comply with these regulations. Private universities receiving federal funding must also adhere to ADA accessibility standards and Clery Act mandates to ensure that campus safety measures and transparency requirements are met. Globally, similar standards are upheld. In Norway, public universities follow the Norwegian Equality and Anti-Discrimination Act, ensuring accessible and secure campuses with resources to support diverse student needs. In Canada, the Safe Campuses Act enforces safety measures and accessibility standards at public institutions to protect students and promote inclusivity. Private universities worldwide face comparable obligations. In South Africa, private universities are required by the Higher Education Act to uphold campus safety standards, report crime statistics, and implement health and security protocols as a condition for maintaining their operating licenses. These regulations demonstrate a shared international commitment to fostering safe, inclusive, and accessible educational environments. Regulations play a crucial role in shaping education, impacting both K-12 and post-secondary institutions in distinct ways. with benefits and challenges across context. The General Data Protection Regulation in the EU, for example, strengthens data security and privacy in schools and universities, ensuring that student information is protected. In K-12 schools, this fosters trust among families and communities. But smaller schools often face significant resource challenges in meeting compliance requirements. For post-secondary institutions, GDPR compliance enhances institutional credibility globally, but it diverts funds from academic and research initiatives, particularly impacting underfunded universities. In the U.S., the Every Child Succeeds Act, ESSA, as we've talked about, has transformed K-12 schools by allocating resources to underperforming schools, supporting equity efforts, and addressing achievement gaps. However, the emphasis on standardized testing can narrow curricula, reducing opportunities for creative, diverse instructional approaches. At the post-secondary level, ESSA influences teacher preparation programs, pushing universities to prioritize data literacy and assessment skills, which align with K-12 needs, but limits time for broader pedagogical training. The Equality Act of 2010 in the UK ensures that schools and universities prevent discrimination based on race, gender, and disability, fostering inclusive and supportive environments. In K-12 schools, this creates equitable opportunities for all students, but resource limitations often hinder full implementation. Similarly, post-secondary institutions must ensure accessible facilities and inclusive policies, benefiting diverse student populations, but challenging smaller universities with high compliance cost. In the U.S., Title IX has significantly advanced gender equity in education, particularly in K-12 schools, by increasing female participation in sports and extracurricular activities. However, schools can face budget reallocations to meet those compliance demands, which can impact other areas. At the post-secondary level, Title IX enhances campus safety and inclusivity by addressing harassment and gender discrimination, though it creates legal and resource challenges for institutions. Finally, in India's National Curriculum Framework, they standardize educational quality K-12, supporting equity across regions. While this improves access to consistent education, resource-limited schools face significant challenges in implementation. In post-secondary institutions, the framework aligns teacher training with national K-12 priorities, promoting standardized preparation, but limiting flexibility to address regional needs. These regulations as a whole highlight a common tension. While they drive equity, inclusion, and accountability, they also impose significant operational and financial demands, particularly on smaller or underfunded institutions. We often call these unfunded mandates. Balancing these impacts remains a critical challenge for educational systems worldwide. Non-compliance with education regulations can result in severe consequences for institutions, affecting operations, reputation, financial stability. One major consequence is financial penalty, particularly in cases of privacy violations. For example, failing to comply with regulations like FERPA in the US or GDPR in the EU can lead to substantial fines, which can strain already limited budgets and divert resources from educational priorities. Reputational damage is another significant risk. Institutions that fail to meet compliance standards may face negative public perception, affecting enrollment and reducing community or donor support. For instance, a university found to mishandle data security or student safety could see a sharp decline in applications and stakeholder trust, which can take years to rebuild. Non-compliance can also lead to increased oversight by regulatory bodies, such as probationary periods, enrollment caps, or frequent audits. These measures can disrupt normal operations and limit an institution's ability to grow or innovate. For example, a school placed on probation for noncompliance may face restrictions on new programs or hiring, further hampering its ability to meet student needs. Noncompliance has other far-reaching consequences that jeopardize the institution's credibility as well. One critical outcome is the potential loss of accreditation, which directly impacts an institution's reputation and ability to operate at all. Without accreditation, schools may lose eligibility for federal funding and financial aid programs, making it difficult for students to afford tuition and to trust the institution's credentials. Another significant consequence is a loss of funding, as noncompliance with regulations tied to federal, state, or government funding, such as Title IV or IDEA, can result in a withdrawal of essential financial support. For example, a school failing to meet equity or accountability standards may see a reduction or complete cutoff of government funds. Institutions also face the risk of legal action, as noncompliance with safety, equity, or transparency laws can result in lawsuits from students, parents, or advocacy groups. These battles can lead to expensive settlements, further draining institutional resources and harming public trust. Finally, noncompliance can render institutions ineligible for financial aid programs, limiting affordability for students and reducing enrollment. Without access to aid, many students may opt for other schools, directly impacting an institution's financial stability and ability to fulfill its mission. These consequences underscore the importance of proactive compliance with educational regulations to ensure operational continuity, protect students, and maintain public trust. Aligning institutional goals with compliance requirements is essential for fostering both accountability and strategic growth. The first step is to integrate compliance into strategic planning by embedding compliance goals directly into the institution's overall strategy. This ensures that compliance efforts are not treated as separate tasks, but as integral components of an institution's mission. For instance, schools can set overlapping goals that address both regulatory requirements and broader objectives, such as advancing equity or sustainability. This dual focus allows compliance to serve as a driver for systemic improvement rather than just a mere obligation. Institutions can also leverage compliance data for institutional change by using it to identify gaps and address critical issues such as disparities in access or outcomes. For example, analyzing data collected under Title IX or GDPR can reveal inequities that need targeted action. Publicizing progress tied to compliance initiatives, such as improved accessibility or reduced achievement gaps, not only ensures transparency, but also enhances an institution's reputation by showcasing its commitment to accountability and improvement. By aligning compliance with strategic goals and leveraging insights it provides, institutions can transform regulatory requirements into opportunities for growth, equity, and enhanced public trust. To fully align goals with compliance, institutions should focus on strategies that go beyond meeting basic requirements. One effective approach is to build compliance-driven partnerships that fulfill both regulatory mandates and institutional missions and goals. By engaging community stakeholders, such as local organizations, government agencies, and advocacy groups, schools can create partnerships that not only support compliance, but also drive institutional growth. For example, collaborating with accessibility advocates can ensure compliance with ADA standards, while simultaneously improving inclusivity for students and for staff. Institutes should also strive to exceed minimum compliance standards, using regulations as foundation to pursue higher goals. By going beyond baseline requirements for areas like privacy or accessibility, schools can position themselves as leaders in equity and innovation. Applying an equity lens to compliance audits ensures that regulatory efforts actively address disparities, helping institutions better serve marginalized communities while meeting legal obligations. Finally, the RACI framework, which assigns roles for responsibility, accountability, consultation, and information, can clarify compliance processes and drive innovation. Clearly defining who is responsible for compliance tasks ensures efficiency and accountability. Additionally, audits can be reframed as opportunities for continuous improvement rather than just assessments, making a compliance tool a tool for institutional excellence. These approaches transform compliance from a reactive task into a proactive strategy, aligning with broader goals and fostering growth, equity, and innovation across the institution. Politics profoundly shapes the way institutions evolve, especially in the field of education. The policies set by political leaders dictate how schools and universities are funded, what students learn, and how educational systems are governed. These decisions can either advance or hinder efforts to make education more inclusive and equitable, particularly for marginalized groups. While policies focused on deregulation or privatization may limit the resources and support available to public institutions, political movements that emphasize equity and social justice can push institutions toward fostering more inclusive, supportive, and accessible environments for all students. Ultimately, the political climate dictates whether education becomes a tool for greater opportunity or a mechanism that entrenches existing inequities. Political agendas play a crucial role in shaping the direction of educational priorities. Policy shifts can dramatically alter what is emphasized in schools and universities, whether it's a push for STEM education to align with economic goals or an emphasis on humanities to foster critical thinking and cultural awareness. Funding allocation is another area where political influence is felt as political decisions determine how resources are distributed. This affects everything from program development and staffing to facility improvements, which directly impact the quality of education students receive. Additionally, political ideologies often influence curriculum design, shaping how certain subjects are taught and which viewpoints are emphasized, ensuring that educational content aligns with the political climate of the time. These dynamics highlight the deep connection between politics and the educational experiences of students, influencing not just what they learn, but how they engage with the world around them. Political processes heavily influence education through regulatory changes that impact school operations. New regulations can introduce specific requirements in critical areas like data privacy, student safety, and compliance, shaping how schools function on a day-to-day basis. The level of institutional autonomy that schools and universities possess is also defined by political decisions, which affect their ability to make independent choices about policies, operations, and curriculum design. Educational leaders and school boards must continuously navigate these political pressures, working to balance compliance with federal or state mandates while honoring the unique values and priorities of local communities. This balancing act is essential to ensuring that regulatory demands are met without compromising the goals, mission, and equity imperatives of the educational institution. Political influences are pivotal in determining the ability of K-12 and post-secondary institutions, both in the U.S. and globally, to innovate and implement lasting changes. From funding priorities to curriculum standards, These political factors can empower or restrict how schools and universities adapt to meet the needs of their communities. To start, funding is a major political factor that directly impacts a school's ability to initiate change. In the U.S., Title I funding provides additional resources for low-income schools, enabling program development and technology integration to support student needs. However, limited or inconsistent funding often hinders a school's ability to sustain new programs. Globally, similar funding structures exist. For instance, in Australia, government subsidies are directed towards specific educational priorities, like supporting rural schools, but can be cut if institutions don't meet compliance standards, making long-term planning challenging. Curriculum standards are another area where politics strongly intersect with education. Updated standards often encourage schools to update and adopt new teaching methods. In the U.S., the Common Core Initiative introduced consistent standards across states, prompting schools to explore fresh approaches to math and literacy. However, political disagreements have led some states to reject the Common Core standards, causing inconsistencies. Internationally, in countries like Finland, national curriculum standards promote flexibility and critical thinking. But in more politically controlled settings like China, curriculum content is tightly regulated, limiting schools' availability and ability to adapt teaching based on local needs. Accountability and testing are central to political oversight in education. In the U.S., the Every Student Succeeds Act, ESSA, as we've talked about, mandates standardized testing to measure school performance, helping institutions identify areas for improvement. Yet, a focus on test results can narrow school priorities, reducing opportunities for creative teaching. Globally, standardized assessments are common in countries like South Korea, where national exams largely determine educational outcomes. This pressure to perform well on tests can create a high-stakes environment that limits instructional flexibility, as teachers may prioritize test prep over broader, deeper educational experiences. School choice policies can also significantly impact institutional change. In the U.S., charter schools and voucher programs promote competition and alternative models, spurring innovation in school structure and teaching methods. However, these programs often divert resources from public schools, limiting their ability to maintain high-quality programs. Similarly, in the UK, government support for free schools and academies has encouraged alternative methods, yet has also raised concerns about resource strain on public schools in the most traditional sense. Equity-focused policies are designed to reduce disparities in education by providing underserved schools with resources. In the U.S., Title IX mandates equal treatment across gender lines, influencing institutional resources and support. However, political debates on equity can lead to delays in implementing or expanding these policies. Internationally, Canada provides targeted funding for Indigenous students, supporting culturally relevant education. But political disagreements on funding distribution sometimes limit consistent support, impacting long-term equity efforts. Teacher policies influence institutional change by affecting morale and retention. In the U.S., collective bargaining agreements in states with strong unions, like California, improve teacher retention and encourage professional development, supporting school stability. In contrast, schools with limited union support often face high turnover, which hinders continuity. Globally, Finland's commitment to high pay and professional development for teachers has resulted in low turnover and high instructional quality. Whereas in countries like India, students may face inconsistent policies and teachers face low pay, impacting school stability and innovation. Lastly, student rights and safety policies shape a supportive environment necessary for change. In the U.S., anti-bullying and Title IX protections foster safe and inclusive environments, encouraging student engagement. However, politically driven safety policies, such as differing state regulations on firearms in schools, sometimes conflict with educational goals. Internationally, Norway's national commitment to student welfare emphasizes mental health and anti-bullying measures, supporting positive school climates, while other countries may struggle to implement consistent safety policies due to political constraints. In summary, political pressures intersect with every aspect of a school or university's ability to evolve. While they can provide essential resources and set standards that drive positive change, these pressures may also introduce restrictions that limit flexibility and innovation. Understanding these dynamics helps educational leaders navigate political influences effectively, balancing compliance with the pursuit of long-term and impactful change. Boards play a crucial role in educational governance, providing the oversight, accountability, and strategic direction that keeps institutions aligned with their missions, community values, and regulatory compliance requirements. By setting the institution's vision and long-term goals, boards define the educational priorities that guide everything from academic programs to student support services. Boards are responsible for oversight and accountability, monitoring effectiveness to ensure transparency and to maintain public trust. In addition, boards serve as representatives of the community and stakeholders, ensuring decisions reflect the needs and interests of those the institution serves. They also play a key role in policy implementation and compliance, setting institutional policies that adhere to legal standards and regulatory requirements. In terms of financial stewardship, boards manage resources carefully to maintain financial stability and safeguard the institution's future. Finally, boards must be adaptable, leading institutions through social, technological, and policy changes to ensure that they remain responsive and relevant in a rapidly evolving educational landscape. Together, these functions make boards indispensable to the health and success of educational institutions. The structure and role of boards vary widely across educational levels and types of institutions, reflecting differences in governance needs, funding sources, and regional contexts. In the U.S. public school system, local school boards operate with state oversight, ensuring alignment with state educational standards and policies. For U.S. private K-12 schools, boards are often independent and heavily focused on fundraising to support the institution's mission. Globally, centralized public education systems typically have nationally controlled boards, while decentralized public systems allow regional or provincial boards to make decisions with a high degree of local autonomy. Global private K-12 schools usually have independent boards aligned with international standards like those of IB or Cambridge. In post-secondary education, U.S. public universities are often governed by state-appointed boards, such as a board of trustees or a board of regents, responsible for maintaining public accountability and strategic oversight. Private U.S. colleges and universities operate with independent boards that manage endowments and oversee institutional direction. In many global contexts, and national or regional ministries control public universities, while others may have university councils with regional autonomy to tailor policies to local needs. Global private institutions typically have independent boards as well, often adhering to international accreditation standards to maintain global competitiveness. These various board structures enable educational institutions to balance autonomy, accountability, and alignment with local or international expectations, ensuring government frameworks that support their unique missions and operational goals. Education systems around the world are influenced by political forces, and in the US, partisan politics play a significant role in shaping public perception and policies. Political ideologies influence curriculum, funding, and institutional priorities, often leading to debates over equity, access, and academic freedom. For example, shifts in political leadership can impact funding for public schools, shape higher education policies, and even dictate how topics like history or science are taught in classrooms. While the specifics of these dynamics are rooted in the U.S. context, the broader impact of political pressures on education is a shared global challenge. These pressures force educational leaders to navigate complex environments where decisions are influenced not only by educational goals, but also by the ideological divides. The lessons from the U.S. experience offer valuable insights for understanding how political influences shape education systems worldwide, equipping leaders with strategies to address similar challenges in their own regions. In the US, Republicans and Democrats differ on their education beliefs and views. Republicans express dissatisfaction with perceived progressive agendas in schools, emphasizing parental control and traditional values. Democrats, generally more satisfied, view education as a tool for advancing equity and access. Critics argue that both approaches can risk either ideological overreach or insufficient inclusivity. Republicans advocate for school choice and reduced federal involvement, believing competition drives innovation. Critics warn this could undermine public schools. Democrats prioritize increased public school funding to promote equity, though some argue this may not always lead to measurable improvement. Republicans push for curricula aligned with conservative values and market-driven funding models, which they argue encourages efficiency. Critics see risks in limiting diverse perspectives and public school investment. Democrats support inclusive curricula and federal funding aimed at reducing disparities, though some worry about inefficiency and overdependence on federal control. Republicans favor local control, empowering communities but risking inconsistencies between districts. Democrats advocate federal oversight to ensure equitable standards, though critics note the potential for a one-size-fits-all policy. Both parties bring valid priorities to education. Republicans focus on competition and local control, while Democrats emphasize equity and federal standards. Addressing these divides may require blending strengths to balance innovation and inclusivity. As we discussed on the previous slide, the Gallup data on the screen also reflects that partisan divide in satisfaction with K-12 education, aligning with broader ideological differences. Republicans are more critical, citing concerns about curricula and governance, while Democrats tend to view public education as a pathway for equity. These perceptions influence debates on funding, school choice, and the role of federal versus local control, reinforcing the themes explored earlier in this module and in previous modules. Confidence in higher education mirrors the divide seen in K-12 education. Republicans express skepticism, focusing on ideological concerns and pushing for reforms. Democrats with higher confidence emphasize equity and investment, while independents show moderate views. These trends underscore the broader partisan dynamics shaping education policies, and highlight opportunities to bridge ideological divides. Balancing regulatory compliance with institutional goals of equity and innovation is essential for driving meaningful change in education. Compliance should not be seen as a limitation, but as a framework within which we can push forward our commitments to diversity, equity, access, and inclusion. By embedding the use of the RACI framework to our compliance strategy, we're able to create clear roles and accountability, aligning requirements with core values and continuous improvement practices. This approach allows us to pursue innovation and social justice, ensuring that compliance supports rather than hinders our mission. Ethical and regulatory compliance is more than just simply meeting legal requirements. It's about embedding values and commitments into the fabric of an institution. First, it's essential to clarify the vision and values, defining equity, racial justice, and inclusion as non-negotiable goals. This ensures that compliance efforts reflect the institution's moral and ethical compass. Next, we map compliance requirements to institutional goals, aligning regulations such as Title IX, ADA, and FERPA with our broader equity objectives. By identifying how these requirements intersect with priorities like inclusion and access, we can make compliance an integral part of achieving our equity goals. Finally, engaging stakeholders, including district leaders, educators, and community members, is critical for fostering collective buy-in. This shared commitment ensures that these efforts extend beyond mere regulatory obligation. To truly integrate ethics and compliance, we must take actionable steps to go beyond baseline standards. First, we should embed innovation in compliance processes by adopting continuous improvement models like the Plan, Do, Study Act. These frameworks allow us to refine and adapt compliance efforts while advancing equity and addressing evolving challenges. Next, it's vital to create accountability and support structures, using tools like the RACI framework to define clear roles, allocate resources, and support initiatives focused on diversity, equity, accessibility, and inclusion. Finally, we need to monitor, reflect, and adjust through regular evaluations of impact and strategy. This cyclical process ensures that compliance efforts are not static, but remain dynamic, reinforcing our institutional and ethical commitment to equity. By doing so, compliance becomes a driver for continuous improvement and meaningful institutional transformation. In any initiative, clear roles definition is essential for managing compliance effectively and ensuring successful strategic implementation. The RACI framework that I've been referring to was developed in the 1950s to improve organizational efficiency, and it remains an invaluable tool for this purpose today. It structures roles and responsibilities into 4 categories: responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed, enhancing clarity and accountability within teams. By reducing confusion and improving communication, the RACI model aligns seamlessly with compliance and strategic goals, helping projects stay on track and ensuring that each team member knows their role and involvement. 2 key roles in the RACI framework are responsible and accountable. The responsible person or team is directly tasked with execution. They focus on completing the work on time and to the expected standard, ensuring that the initiative keeps moving forward. This role is hands-on and action-driven. The accountable person, on the other hand, oversees the task or decision at a higher level. This individual is ultimately answerable for the success or failure of the activity. Ensuring responsibilities are well aligned and work is progressing as planned is key. They also address any roadblocks or barriers that could hinder progress. Importantly, there is typically 1 accountable person per task to maintain clarity. Again, clear role definition is critical for successful leadership. We need to eliminate ambiguity. 2 additional important roles in this framework are those who are consulted and informed. The consulted individuals are those whose input is sought before decisions are made or actions are taken. These are the experts, advisors, or key stakeholders who provide guidance, expertise, or feedback to ensure the best possible outcomes. While they are not directly responsible for completing the task, their involvement is crucial for informed decision-making and effective execution. The informed individuals, on the other hand, are people who need to be kept up to date on the progress of the task or decisions being made. They do not actively contribute to the task, but they remain in the loop to prevent communication errors and ensure alignment. Keeping these stakeholders informed avoids misunderstandings and ensures transparency across the team or organization. By clearly defining who needs to be consulted and who needs to be informed, the RACI model minimizes miscommunication and fosters a more collaborative and effective team dynamic. The Noster model for managing complex change, and this version, adapted by EL Education, provides a valuable framework for guiding our strategic planning, assignments, ensuring we have the critical elements: vision, skills, incentives, resources, and action plans. These are all needed for sustainable and effective change. Adapted by Dr. Tim Noster, this model outlines the importance of each element and the risks of omitting any one of them, such as confusion, resistance, or frustration, especially in complex educational settings. By following this model, we can develop a strategic plan that genuinely and authentically supports diversity, equity, access, and inclusion, aligning with values and goals of the institution. Throughout your assignment, each section aligns closely with aspects of the Noster model. Embedding these essential elements for implementing impactful and long-lasting change will be important. The executive summary and introduction sections establish the vision of your strategic plan, focusing on DEAI as core non-negotiable goals. Here, you'll define the purpose and motivation behind the proposed changes, providing a shared understanding of what can inspire collective commitment. Without a clear vision, the strategic plan risks causing confusion among stakeholders who may not grasp the purpose behind the recommended actions. The skills needed to carry out your recommendations are cultivated through the specific module requirements and SMARTY goal sections, where you'll develop strategies for targeted investments, recruitment, or technology integration. These sections build the knowledge and abilities necessary for effective implementation, aligning with DEAI goals and ensuring stakeholders have expertise needed to execute the plan. Without these skills, stakeholders may experience anxiety or resistance, feeling unprepared to put the plan in action. Incentives are crucial for generating buy-in, which we'll address in the strategic plan recommendations section. Each recommendation should clearly convey the incentives for stakeholders, demonstrating how the proposed changes align with DEAI values and contribute to institutional excellence. When incentives are well defined, stakeholders are more likely to engage with the plan, seeing both personal and collective benefits in supporting change. Without incentives, resistance may build as stakeholders struggle to understand the impact of these changes on their roles and responsibilities. Resources are a foundation of any strategic plan, and in each module, you'll outline the resources needed, whether financial, human, or material, to support implementation. Identifying these resources ensures that every recommendation is feasible and has necessary backing. Without these resources, frustration can grow among those responsible for implementing changes, as they may feel unable to meet strategic goals effectively. The action plan is brought to life through the action steps, timeline, and RACI framework, which clarifies roles and responsibilities. Defining who is responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed, the RACI framework provides an essential structure to clarify the implementation process. This organized approach, which also includes success measures and challenges, helps ensure everyone understands their role and the proactive problem-solving systems. Without a clear action plan, stakeholders may feel they're on a treadmill, busy but not making any real progress towards the goals. Finally, the conclusion section of your assignment gives you the chance to reflect on the entire strategic planning process, considering how each component of the Noster model contributes to making meaningful, substantial change. By following this model, your strategic plan becomes comprehensive, equipping you to address DEAI goals and support equity and excellence across the institution. The Nostra model emphasizes that all these elements must work together. Only then can we achieve impactful, long-term change that aligns with our missions and values. As we conclude this journey through the complexities of strategic decision-making and market forces in education, I want to acknowledge the depth, dedication, and insight each of you brought to this course. This isn't just an exploration of theories and frameworks, but a profound dive into the responsibilities and challenges educational leaders face today. You engage with difficult questions about equity, access, and sustainability, issues that don't have clear or easy answers. But through each module, you confronted these topics with a commitment to ensuring that every student has the opportunity to succeed, regardless of background. Your work here represents more than academic achievement. It reflects a true dedication to fostering inclusive, equitable, and excellent educational environments. As you move forward, remember that strategic decision-making is an evolving process. Education at its best is a living, responsive field, one that adapts and grows in response to the voices, needs, and aspirations of students, families, and communities. Carry with you the frameworks, skills, and strategies you've developed in this course, but also the mindset of a lifelong learner dedicated to advocate for equity and inclusion. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey. I'm inspired by your commitment and look forward to seeing the positive impact you will make. You are ready to lead, transform, and inspire change in your institutions. Congratulations for all that you've achieved, and here's to many successes yet to come. And congratulations once again.